Okay, the Torah says you have to have four species. The first one is called kapis tamarim. It's the tops of date palm. So what does that mean? Basically, it's interesting. They're hard to see, but when we see a palm branch, it's like all split already. When you get at a younger stage, it's first like a stick. So our palm branches, right, when they grow bigger, they will separate. So it has to be in a young, that's called a lulav. What's a pre-eitz hadar means a beautiful fruit. A beautiful fruit means a esrig. Anaf itzavis, a chain of leaves, thick leaves. This is a hadas, that the leaves cover the stick. So there has to be, actually, if you look at the hadas always, there are three leaves on top of three leaves, right? So that is, okay. And so let's say there are two, and the third one's above that. That is called the hadas shoita. So when we look at a hadas, I could bring one out even, I might even have one. But when you look at a hadas, it should have three leaves. Yeah, you have three leaves on top of three leaves. If it's two and one, so that is, that's not proper. Arve nachal, willow. This is not anything which grows next to a river. Rather, it's a known thing. Willow, arve nachal. It's a specific breed of something which grows next to rivers, and its leaf is kind of lengthy, and its mouth is smooth and pointy, and it has a red branch, and that is called the arava. And the reason why it's called the arve nachal is because it's very common to grow next to rivers and bodies of water. However, if it's not next to a body of water, that is also kosher. There's another thing, which is a similar species, which has the leaves are more rounded, and the branch inside is not red, and that's called a tzafzafa. And the tzafzafa is not kosher. So, there are examples of this, like eucalyptus. If you look at eucalyptus, it looks very, very similar to arava, and there are many breeds that look very similar, but they're ultimately not kosher. Then you also have another type of arava, which it's not smooth. It has like little grids, and this is quite common. The aravas that we buy from the store are very nice, but like when you're looking in Prescott or you're looking in different places and you're finding aravas, a lot of times there's like the leaves have like little nicks in them. It's kind of like, so that is, and it looks almost like a sickle. This is kosher. And all these things, like the Torah just doesn't specify exactly what they are. These are all laws from Moses at Sinai that were passed down from Moses at Sinai. So we have a Jewish tradition actually that Moses sent angels to Italy to bring an esrog to the desert. There are no esrogim growing in the desert, right? But there's a Jewish tradition that he showed everybody these things. God brought them, just like we have a Jewish tradition that Moses, when he showed which animals are kosher, the Torah says, Zot hachaya. These are the animals. Moses showed all the animals, even though they're animals that were not...
Didn't exist yet.
Well, they all existed probably, but they didn't exist in that region at all. They existed in other regions. These four things are one mitzvah, and if you're missing one, you can't do the mitzvah. And you can't add to them. You can't add to them. And if you don't have one, you can't say, oh, let me take another type of thing to replace them. It's a mitzvah to tie the lulav and the hadas and the arava and make them all tied up. And when you go out, you say the bracha. When you want to do the mitzvah, sorry, please stop. When you want to do the mitzvah, you say al natilas lulav, because they're all next to the lulav, because the lulav is the biggest. And then afterwards, you take it in your right hand and the esrog in your left hand, and you have to hold them in the direction that they grow. So interestingly enough, one of the differences between an esrog and a lemon tree is lemons start off like this. Esrogim, they start off going up, and then eventually they get too heavy, so they go down. So you have to hold them with their pitum up. That part has to be up, and if you did not tie them together and you took each one separately, you are yatsa. And that is if they're all next to you. However, if you only have one or you're missing one, you shouldn't take all four together until you have all of them. How much do you take of each? A lulav, 1, esrog, 1. You should take 2 aravas and 3 hadassim. And if you want to add on the hadassim, you should add. The Chabad tradition is to add on.
Yeah, I noticed with yours,
Well, so
You have a big
the
bundle.
Rebbe sometimes had 12, 13, and then the later years the Rebbe had 36. So I just adopted to get 36 also. Hadass is not the expensive part of the lulav. It's relatively inexpensive to buy them, but I always just adapted to that. However, the other things you cannot add in them, and you cannot take off. And if you add or take out, you have disqualified the lulav. How long does a lulav need to be? A lulav cannot be less than 4 tefachim, which is 4 handbreadths, which is about 12 inches. And if it's longer, that's kosher. What other size did it need to be? Well, so if you look at a lulav, there's what's called the spine. The spine is the middle leaf, which goes all the way to the front. So the spine is what needs to be that length. From the top of you don't have to have the whole lulav be 4 tefachim, the spine has to be that. And the hadas and the arava have to be at least 3 handbreadths, which was about 9 to 12 inches. So I would say that the lulav has to be 12 to 16, and the hadas has to be 9 to 12. And if they're longer, it's kosher. Even if you don't, so actually what you need to do is if you want a small lulav, like some people, they traveling or whatever it is, the lulav has to be 1 handbreadth longer than. So there could be 3 and the lulav has to be 4. It could be 5 and the lulav has to be 6. That's
So do you just look? You can't cut them to make them shorter.
you can.
Oh, you can.
You actually can, and people do typically when they're traveling or for convenience sake, people do that. The lulav, you could just cut the bottom off. The lulav already is cut, a lot of them, and when you buy a lulav, actually, usually the bottom is dipped in wax. Just kind of holds it together
I didn't know
better,
that.
yeah. A lot of lulavim are from Egypt, and then the last couple of years they started growing them in Israel, so they could charge more for them. That's really it, because basically the ones in Egypt are harvested, and then you got to pick which ones grew kosher. The ones in Israel, you can grow a farm, and then you can monitor them, and they can all be kosher and all be perfect, because they have someone tending to them. So that's the way lulavs work. I don't know. I think they still get the free ones that come along are from Egypt. So what they do is they check through to make sure they're kosher once they arrive in New York or Israel or wherever it is. And then the consumer, so let's say I buy 10 esrogim, I probably received 20 lulavim because they know they're from Egypt. You have to choose 10 ones that are kosher.
So obviously you can buy from a non-Jew.
Yes, you can buy all these things from a non-Jew. I mean, you can buy them all from the forest. You can take them if they don't belong to anybody. In Israel, what someone did, and actually the nice lulav is called the Dairy. The guy's last name is Dairy. He basically started a revolution. He said, instead of people looking for the lulav for hours and finding one in a big pile, why don't I just grow perfect farm of them and charge $20, $30 each, and then package them up, and then you don't even have to choose. Everyone gets a perfect one. So I buy one of those, but
Who do you order from when you order in New York? Or
there's all sorts of different sellers, and they're all good, and they're all around the same price. I did find this year, so I try and get ones which are well priced and from specific farms in Israel. There's all sorts of different sellers. I've ordered from different people. I've ended up ordering from someone who only does online business, because the one time I ordered from someone who doesn't only, and he almost forgot to ship it and everything like that because he had so much going on. I did hear actually there's an Italian esrog company, which is the oldest one in New York, which was selling to shluchim, if you buy a bunch of them, for $40 each, which that's a really good deal for Italian esrog. I might do it next year, because what I like about them is I know them and they'll choose one nice one for me. Otherwise, and then I saw there was a shliach somewhere who was selling. Anyone who can get an in the business gets an in. So he was selling them, and he had actually pictures of each one online. You could choose it online, which is kind of a nice feature. And
that's a great thing.
yeah, so I mean, there's one guy in New York who has fancy online where you can actually it's a video kind of spins graphic.
3D.
But the thing about him is he doesn't ship. So he doesn't ship. He just does it for people's convenience. They don't have to go to the store, and you can choose. My brother-in-law, one of my brother-in-laws in New York, every year, he painstakingly goes and chooses an esrog for my father-in-law and for himself, to find the best one and everything and pay whatever price it is. He did it for me one year because he came here for Sukkot. So I told him, "Can I bring anything?" I said, "Bring esrogim," and he did that for me, but now I've kind of said, hey, my hitter mitzvah is just going to be in the price. That's going to be my hitter mitzvah because it's too hard to choose one. And when you choose a esrog, there's a lot of things to look in, and they're not clear in halacha, and there's a lot of opinions. And there's what they call a gartel. A gartel is some esrogim have a belt where you have it's like a bulge at the bottom, bulge at the top. And some people will say that's what it has to be, then a nice esrog, because there's certain things which are unusual about an esrog, which the Torah calls it beautiful. So you want those things which are unusual. So one thing is you have a gartel. There's some of them. So the Chabad tradition is to get one that looks like almost an overflowing cup. But there's some people say no. The more triangular and pointed at the top is the better. So there are all these different opinions, and they actually have names for all these things, and actually based on the region they grow, because it's all tradition what a kosher esrog is. So you have the Chassam Sofer esrog. Oh no, Chazon Ish esrog. Chazon Ish was a famous rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Korelitz, who lived in the 20s, 30s, 40s, was one of the biggest rabbis there. So he had his tradition of esrog, and so they have that option. And then they have what they call a Yanover esrog, Italian esrog. So there's certain traits that Italian esrog have. Someone told me that there's amazing esrogim growing in California, and they're very expensive, but they're like really nice. And there's actually a guy who grows esrogim and his father has a second home here. Sometimes comes here. The guy grows esrogim in Scottsdale.
I was going to say, Arizona would be.
So the thing about it is people do like to get from Israel and Italy, and the only reason why people get from different places is because it's cheaper. So in Scots, there's Moroccan and Mexican esrogim, which are cheaper, But if you're going to grow it in Scottsdale, people aren't going to say oh wow, a locally grown one, I'll pay more for it. Now also esrogim are very hard farms, it's very hard to do part time. Very hard to do part time because they need a lot of maintenance and they don't give fruit for very many years. So it's kind of you got to keep planting, constantly keep planting if you want to have it in a few years from now.
High maintenance.
Yeah, they're very high maintenance. So in Palo Alto as a kid, I have a friend, his father grew esrog tree, successful esrog tree, and he uses esrog, but it didn't allow, it was very hard, he couldn't maintain it. There was a esrog tree when we walk home from shul, and one time walking, hey, that looks like an esrog tree. So, and it had big, beautiful esrogim. Now, I don't know if they were kosher because as we'll see, if it has a little dot here or whatever it is, the different types of dots that disqualify it. But they were big, beautiful esrogim. So I knocked on the door of the owner, and they said, no, a Jewish guy lived here before us, and he, had this tree. Now, also, they're very easy to graft. Esrogim tree, and the advantages of grafting a esrogim tree is a lemon tree gives fruit for 30 years. An esrog tree gives fruit for 10 years. And a esrog tree, if a leaf is touching it while it's growing it, it can ruin it. When you look on, there's dry spots. So dry spots are kosher, but that's because a leaf is touching it. Or if a bug does this, they're very sensitive creatures. If you take a lemon tree and cut off the tree and then plant a esrog tree into the lemon roots, it will have beautiful esrogim, and it will produce beautiful esrogim, and they'll be much stronger, and the tree will produce for 30 years instead of
Are they kosher? They're kosher?
No, so they're not. So that's always a scandal, not in Israel, but in Italy and stuff like that, because if you're growing the trees, you don't need maintenance for a lemon tree. And if you put an esrog tree in a lemon tree, you don't really need maintenance. So anyways, I don't know, that tree...
So that's fraud.
It would be considered halachic fraud. So now, in Italy, they're very into food. So the people who grow esrogim, there's a market for food esrogim. Now, the food esrogim, if you're selling as a food, you want to graft it because, you'll have more product. So that is a scam.
So they would be kosher for eating, or?
Yeah, they're kosher for eating. So you go and there's candied esrogim. I remember being in supermarkets where they sell esrogim for $2.99 a pound, and they're all beautiful, but they're obviously grafted. So, because obviously, why when you go, okay, when you pick them all up, whether you pick them up as once, and a esrog cannot be smaller than a egg size. And if it's bigger, it's kosher. Now, Yemenite esrogim, they have their own esrogim. You can look up online. Sometimes Yemenite esrogim are like, they have watermelon-sized esrogim in Yemen, and they still use them in Israel. There is a limit how big. If you can't hold it, then you can't use it. But Yemenite have huge esrogim. In Israel, there's a market for people from Yemen. They like to have esrogim from their hometown, and their home, and that's what they do. And they probably replanted them in Israel. Okay, when you pick them up, all four, whether you pick them in one hand after another, whether in the right or left, you have fulfilled the mitzvah, and that's if they're right side up. But if they're not right side up, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. However, the proper way of doing it is three in one hand, lulav, hadas, and arava in the right hand, and the esrog in the left hand, and you should put them in all directions and shake them 3 times in every direction. Now, that in the Talmud it says according to Kabbalah. So if you just shake it, then you're okay. If you just hold it, you're okay. But according to Kabbalah, we do it in all directions. What do? You do them 3 times, and you bring it forward, up and down. And when you're reading the Hallel by Hodu, you shake it. And the beginning of Ana, Hashem, Hoshiana, and the whole, you can shake the lulav the whole day, but you cannot shake the lulav at night. I've seen, unfortunately, pictures of Jewish institutions that they have a party at night and shake the lulav, but the Torah says only during the day. Let's say you have a really nice gold or silver holder for your lulav. We're not talking about to store your lulav. Now the rage is people get leather cases to store their lulav with their name on it. That's fine, but you cannot shake the lulav in the case, right? So let's say you have a gold or silver thing, or you have, so now, it is kosher. You have fulfilled the mitzvah if you were holding it in something else, and that's so long as it is honorable. However, if you put them in something which is not honorable, like a pot, it's not kosher. If you hold it but we nevertheless, it is better not to put it in the case while you're holding it, obviously. If you tie it with a hadas and a rava, and you split between the lulav and the hadas with something else, this is considered, so the hadasim and the ravas have to be touching. If you have something, if you divide with them with something made out of hadas, then that's kosher. So when you have a basket, the basket's made out of lulav, so that's considered an okay separation. But, okay. You could do it with a string and all these things because tying it from the outside is okay. It's a mitzvah lulav to shake on the first day, at all times, even on Shabbos. And we're going to say, don't worry. And in the rest of the days in the Mikdash, you shake the lulav. However, if the first day of Shabbos, so it's a mitzvah to take it on the first day, only in all places and all times, even on Shabbos. As it says, you should take it on the first day. And the Mikdash, they would take it every day, 7 days of the holiday. As it says, you should be joyous for 7 days. If Shabbos falls during the holiday, they wouldn't take it because maybe you would end up carrying it. So the rabbis made a decree. Why did they make a decree? Because it's a mitzvah from the Torah, even outside. But it comes out why did the rabbis make a decree? Why didn't the rabbis make a decree during those times? Because it's a mitzvah from the Torah in all places. Comes out that the halacha is, if you don't do it on the first day, you won't be able to do it any other day, only in the temple. When the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, the rabbi said you should do it in all places, all 7 days, to remember the temple. And every day you should say Al Netilas Lulav because it's a mitzvah from the rabbis. And this is with all the things Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made when the Beis Mikdash was destroyed. When the Beis Mikdash was around, the lulav was taken on the first day, which fell out on Shabbos, and all other places, for sure that this day was the holidays in Israel. But places which were very far that didn't know, they wouldn't take the lulav because maybe this day isn't a holiday. So if you were in Israel, you would take the lulav on Shabbos. If you were very far from Israel and you had 2 days of holidays, and Shabbos was the first day, you weren't sure that the holiday's on Shabbos, so you wouldn't take it. When the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, the rabbi said you can no longer shake the lulav on Shabbos on the first day, even the people in Israel, because they wanted everyone to be equal. And and then therefore there's no temple to depend on, and therefore we don't actually shake the lulav even in Jerusalem, even in the old city. We don't shake the lulav on the first day of the holiday when it falls out on Shabbos like this year. Nowadays, and so after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they still did the mitzvah of determining the new moon. But now, but then even after, okay, so nowadays, when everyone has a mathematical calendar, we keep it the way it is. We don't take it on Shabbos at all. Not in Israel, not outside, not the first day, not any other day. And we said that what's the reason why? Because we're worried you're going to carry your lulav on Shabbos. Anyone who needs to, hear the shofar and the sukkah, he needs the lulav. And anyone who's exempt, they're exempt. A child who knows how to shake, he needs a lulav. And actually, the rabbis say, it's interesting, you're supposed to buy your children a lulav. And it gets very interesting. I can lend you my lulav, but a child cannot lend you his lulav. This is a very interesting halachic thing. We're going to say it soon. Okay, so those are the laws. So actually, women, when it comes to shofar and lulav, they're not obligated to do it. The rabbis in the Talmud say they should do it. They should do it.
Is
But
it a mitzvah for them to do?
it's not a full obligation like a mitzvah. So women should shake lulav and esrog, and it is somewhat of a mitzvah, but it's a lower level mitzvah. It's a law from Moses at Sinai so if a lady's stuck home with the kids on Shabbos, whatever it is, or on Yontif, she doesn't actually, it's okay. But we still try and get every woman to hear shofar because the rabbi still said it is important. It's a law from Moses at Sinai that you bring to, so again, this is not in the Torah, but a law from Moses and Sinai that you bring another arava, another willow branch, and you cannot use the arava and the lulav. It has to be a separate arava, and it can even be one leaf or one part of the branch. What do you do every day? You go around, you take this arava and you go around the altar. And the head of it should be bent to the altar. And when you bring it, you blow the shofar during that time. So this is what they do in the temple times during Sukkot, every day of Sukkot.
They blow the shofar on Sukkot.
Well, they blow the shofar while they were doing the service, where everyone walk around the altar with their arava. And that's what actually Har Shyness is a commemoration for this. If Shabbos falls during the holiday, then they wouldn't bend their arava. Unless it was the seventh day. The seventh day is the seventh day. Second.
Hoshana Rabbah?
Yeah, seventh is the Shana. If you want to say it last one, please. Okay, the seventh day is straighten it out, even on Shabbos, in order to show that it's a mitzvah. What they would do is they would bring out Erev Shabbos and they would put it under these. They put them in these barrel things made out of gold, so they shouldn't dry out. And the next day, they would bring them to the altar, and then they would take them and they would do what they do every day. And this arava, since it's not said in the Torah, it doesn't speak about it in the Torah, and we don't take it for 7 days. It's we only do it on the seventh day. What do? We take the hadas and we hit it on the ground. Twice or 3 times without a blessing, and this is a custom of the prophets. So mystically, what we do is we take 5 and hit on the ground 5 times. But this is where the origin comes from. So it's actually quite an incredible custom that goes all the way from the times of the prophets, going all the way back to Moses. It's not written in the Torah anywhere, but this is what we do. Every day, they would also go around with their lulav 1 time, and they would say Ana Hashem Mashiach. And the 7th day, they would go 7 times. And we do that. We put a box or a table in the middle of the shul, and we all go around to commemorate the temple. That was the custom in Jerusalem. Every person would go out of his house in the morning. Now, keep in mind that men had a mitzvah to be in Jerusalem for the holidays. So all the men were in Jerusalem, hopefully. And they would go out with their lulav, and they would go to the shul and daven while they were holding it. And they would go visit people, sick people, and people who were mourning, and they were holding it. And then we would go to study it. They would send it home with their hand or their servant. A lady can get the lulav from her son or her husband and put it back in the water on Shabbos, in the times that they take it on Shabbos. But and a holiday she can add water. So that's in the times that they would use the lulav on Shabbos. A hadas, you cannot smell it because it's not meant to smell. It's meant for a mitzvah, so you can't smell it. But Esther, you could smell it because it is set for a mitzvah from eating. So in other words, an estrog is usually used to eat, so therefore you can smell it. But a hadas, you're not meant to smell because it's usually used to smell, and therefore you should say it's like making a statement. I'm not using this to smell. You cannot eat an esrog on the seventh day because it's still designated for the mitzvah. On the eighth day, you could eat it, and even though and times even in the times when we take 2 days of the holiday, even though we don't use the lulav, you shouldn't use the esrog on the eighth day. Just like okay, and if you have 7 esrogim on each day, each one you can eat the next day. So if you know that, let's say you have a cheap esrog or have one esrog, and you know FedEx is going to bring another esrog, a nicer one tomorrow, so the next day you can eat the first esrog. So that's let's get the Gemara. We'll learn for a few minutes Gemara, and then I got to call my call. So there are full books about kosher esrogim. A brand new book came out this year in Hebrew. It's a long book. It's from one of the experts on esrogim, because what happened in America is people. It was always like many communities were always getting esrogim in Russia, and the Lubavitch and the Hasidic communities always wanted an Italian one, and the Italian one was always less nice. And it was always, a lot of times it was like really not a nice esrog. It was barely kosher. Then suddenly they started producing really nice ones. So people in America were like, hey, are they grafting them? So they sent experts in the 50s to Italy to check it out and everything like that. So what makes it difficult to tell is when you graft an esrog, you can look at the roots and see if it's grafted. But what if you take one of those esrogim and replant that? So that esrog, you can't really tell. There's no way of telling. So that brings to different halachic questions, and different layers, standards. Like maybe it's kosher, but you should use. So there's a lot of people. The esrogim that I buy from Israel are from the Rebbe's esrog. They took the Rebbe's esrogim and they replanted them in Israel, and they made full orchards. Generations of orchards. So people value those because they say if the Rebbe blessed an esrog and said the words, God commanded me to shake this, to take it, it must be a kosher esrog, even if it's from Italy. Right? So there are a lot of people actually that they will buy, and nevertheless, once they started planting it, the Rebbe still told people you should still get one from Italy. So some people say, what some people do is they'll actually buy 2 esrogim, one from Italy and one from Israel, and they'll shake both of them. That way they're doing the one from Italy, but just in case that one's from a grafted esrog, they're doing one from the Rebbe's esrog, which, the Rebbe wouldn't say, God commanded me to do it, because there was an esrog, and you can look it up online, the Corfu esrog of Corfu, Greece, was like really beautiful esrogim, and there was huge controversy for hundreds of years if that's a kosher esrog. And so many rabbis, there were times that it was the only esrog they could get. So they would say, don't make a blessing on it. Say,
just in case.
Well, say, blessed is God who commanded me to take this esrog, but you shouldn't say God's name, because just in case, maybe it's not kosher. And even the third Lubavitch Rebbe, one time that was the only esrog he could get, so you didn't make a blessing, but they used it. Anyways, it was a huge debate how to tell an esrog is kosher, because in different countries it's reasonable. There are different enzymes in the earth that will produce a different product. So ultimately, there was a huge blood libel in Corfu, and like thousands of Jews were murdered. And the Corfu esrogim was a non-Jewish business. It wasn't Jews growing them; it was Gentiles. So at that point, Jews said, "Okay, let's put an end to the controversy, and we're going to boycott them, and we're not going to consider them kosher anymore, because whatever, they don't ultimately know." But it is quite a interesting, difficult subject to define the kashrus of esrog.
But grafting is a very old practice, so there's no way to know for sure.
Correct.
That
Well, grafting
100 years ago wasn't grafted.
Correct. So that's why people assume. There is a famous story with, I think, one of the great Rebbes used esrog from Corfu, and they said, "Oh, well, we'll use one now." And he said, "No, he's a Rebbe. God would obviously set up that tree was a kosher tree." He said, "But me, I have to use, regular tactics, So that's why, for that reason, there are a lot of people who say, the only esrog we know for sure was kosher would be the Rebbe's esrogim, because the Rebbe used them, and so There are many people. So I actually try and buy ones from Kfar Chabad, from that orchard, and they actually say on the box, grown from the Rebbe's esrig of this year or whatever it is. It's not any more expensive or anything because it's not any more expensive.
So Kfar Chabad has an orchard of the Rebbe's,
Yeah, yeah.
and they distribute here in the U.S.?
Yeah, yeah. Most esrogim in the U.S. are from now. When you have, you also have the orchard that the Chazon Ish, who was Rabbi Nissim Karelitz, used. So there are people in Israel who are Litvish, and most Americans don't even follow this stuff. But this stuff is integral in the esrog. This is integral information. But so there are people who say, look, I used from that orchard, because that orchard is the one that was used by this rabbi hundreds of years, so there are, and then even the ones in America, Mexico, Morocco is a popular place to buy cheap esrogim now. They all have to go back to some esrog. Like you can't go to Sprouts and buy a citron and replant it. You have to be able to go back to a tree that was somewhat used.
So
There were rabbis who said that if you have an esrog which is grafted, if it's a large esrog, then it's technically kosher because it looks like an esrog, everything about it is an esrog, and therefore the graftedness in it is part of it. In other words, it has kosher esrog in it. So there are different opinions, but everyone agrees that obviously grafted is now grafted esrogim. Jews aren't allowed to graft things. That's number one. So in Israel, for sure not. In America, you're allowed to buy grafted products. Most of our, if you look online, there's 4 citrons, which are the original citrons. Citron, there's another one, it's often called Hand of Buddha or whatever it is, similar. Citron, that one, I believe, I don't remember. Mandarin, there's a certain type of mandarin is an original one. And then, I can't remember. I always get confused because you think orange but orange is actually a graft between a mandarin and a grapefruit, or something like that. So that is something that people have to be careful of, which we at the market level don't really, but like when there's a kosher symbol, so there are rabbis in Italy who go and check.
You have to believe somebody. Right?
Yeah, so there's rabbis in Italy, shluchim in Italy, who go and they check on the orchards, even though it's like a long drive, but they go check on the orchards to make sure. And in Israel, it's much easier to determine because the actual farmers are Jewish and they're in the business. In Italy, the farms are owned by some old Italian family, and the way it works in a country like Italy is it's the same family for like 1,000 years.
Does fruit have DNA? Can they? Is there?
It's like DNA. Fruit does, but the thing about it is we know all 4 original citrons are related, right? Now, we believe in the Torah. We don't believe God created one citron and it. We believe it could be God created 4 types of trees, right? And then humans went and grafted them together and everything like that. So now it's like DNA. DNA cannot tell you you're Jewish or a Kohen or a Levi. If you get 10,000 Kohanim and they have a tradition that they are Kohanim and they all take their DNA, then maybe we should likely see a common strain. So it is possible to do, but it's like, in other words, ultimately, how do we know they're Kohanim? Not only do we know they're Kohanim because it's their tradition, but even the DNA is Kohanim DNA because they're tradition. If they didn't know they're Kohanim, we would never be able to use DNA to say they're Kohanim.
Right.
So
the marker is derived from the tradition.
Correct. So it's the same thing with esrogim. It's like if you have, let's say, if someone would take the Rebbe's esrog and then take that and say, okay, well that's going to be our basis. That we assume the Rebbe's esrog is kosher. Then you could maybe do something like that. There is a new business, the best esrogim, which I didn't even try to get. But so the Rebbe basically, he encouraged esrogim in Israel, but he also at the same time said you should try and get one from Italy. So there's a new guy who started planting the Rebbe's esrog seed in Italy. And that's by invitation only. It's not invitation only, just you have to. There's no
That's the best of both worlds.
No one's gonna ship to you because they have enough people who don't need shipping. It's not a major market yet. But eventually, I likely chances eventually all the Esrogim in Italy will probably, they'll switch that market because make more money. Okay. Now it is interesting to note
Crazy.
that Italy does have special enzymes in its earth. I don't know with regard to Esrogim, but actually, true Parmigiano Reggiano cheese can only be made in Italy because the dirt has special enzymes, which creates a different taste in the milk. So that was interesting. I saw that, and
So what the cows are eating.
what the cows are eating, the grass they're eating,
transmitted.
is transmitted. And the Torah actually says that Esav is going to get Mishmane Haaretz. He's going to get the fattiest land, fattiest earth. And where is the fattiest earth? According to Jewish tradition, Rashi says it's Italy. That's what Rashi says. So there is interesting. Give me a second. Let's just do a little bit of Gemara. Give me a second. Okay. Now we were talking about how we were supposed to review the parsha before the Shabbos or before the parsha. So now that's one advice, and that's on the that's four paragraphs on the bottom of page 51. So now we're going to give some other advice from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Vizhar b'varidin, Rabbi Yehuda. The time Rabbi Yehuda Eimer ad sheyishchet es avaridin. Be careful with the veins, in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. We learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said. So if you look, you see this picture. This is actually a really great picture for shechita. So you can see okay. So he said with regarding to the trachea and the esophagus and the ritual slaughter of a bird, does not render the bird kosher until he slaughters the jugular veins as well. While this is not halachically required, it is appropriate to prevent significant amounts of blood from remaining in the birds. So really you have to cut off the life source from the bird, food and oxygen. However, Rabbi Yehuda said, you also have to cut off the blood, so the blood drains out. And actually when they shech chickens, if you ever do kaparis or whatever it is, they shech the chicken really fast, they let blood drip on the ground, they cover it with earth, that's the mitzvah, and then they put it upside down and usually like a cone. That way the blood can come out, and that way the blood will not remain in the bird. Because it's forbidden to eat blood, and even though we kosher it, but we don't want any extra blood to remain in the bird. V'hizaru b'zaken sheshachach talmudei machmas einsei. Damrina luchas shevei luchas menachem v'aron. He said, be careful, continue. Let's say you have a Torah scholar who gets old and he forgets his Torah knowledge. It's beyond his control, Even though he's no longer a Torah scholar, he has to be respected because he had Torah. And we learned that from the tablets and the broken tablets. They were both in the ark, right? So even though the broken tablets practically speaking, they aren't really the tablets anymore. We have a new tablet. Give honor to them. When you're cutting, he says, when you're cutting meat, do not cut it on your hands. Why? Some people it's dangerous. You might cut your hand. Some say, well, maybe you won't cut your hand, but you have a little bit of blood, a little bit of cutting on your hand. It's not dangerous, but it will make the food repulsive. He says, do not sit on the bed of an Aramean woman. You should not pass by a synagogue when the community is praying. The Gemara explains. Okay, the Gemara says, you shouldn't sit on the bed of Aramean means one should not go to sleep without saying Shema, as by doing, it's tantamount by sleeping on the bed of a non-Jew. So someone say that's what it means. Don't go on a bed of Aramean, don't go to sleep like a Gentile. Some say one should not marry a woman who converted, and it's better to marry a woman who was born Jewish. And some say it is literally an Aramean woman. You shouldn't sit in a bed of an Aramean woman. And why not? The story of Rabbi Papa. Rav Papa was a famous rabbi. The Rav Papa Azalagabe Ramis, Hitzil Emita Amrlai. Shave. Rav Papa went to visit an Aramean woman. She took out a bed and she said to him, "Sit." He said to her, "I will not sit on it until you lift the sheets covering the bed." She picked it up and they found a dead baby there. Had Rav Papa sat on it, she would have blamed him for murdering the baby. And from that point, the rabbi said, "Do not sit on an Aramean bed. You never know; they might have some trick up their sleeve like that." Ba'al tavru acheri beis hakneses. Do not pass by it literally means the back of a synagogue, while they're playing. This supports the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, who says one who's prohibited from walking behind a synagogue while the congregation is playing, because they will suspect they didn't want to pray, and it's a show of contempt. When do we say this prohibition applies? Only if there's no other entrance to the synagogue. But if there's another entrance, since it's possible they will simply use the other entrance, they will not suspect him, and the prohibition doesn't apply. When do we say that there's no other synagogue, no other minyan? If there's another shul you could daven at, then it's okay. We only say this if he's not carrying something, or he's not running, or he's not wearing tefillin. But if he's doing those things, then we assume that he's a God-fearing individual, he's wearing tefillin, and he's just occupied with a mitzvah. So therefore, that's why he couldn't do it. Now, let's just do one more. These are very interesting. The Gemara cites the Tanya Amar Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, there are three things that I love the Medians. When they cut meat, they only cut on a table and not on their hands. When they kiss, they only kiss. They only kiss on the hands, not to give the person being kissed an unpleasant feeling. And when they give advice, they only counsel. They only counsel in a field so others will not hear. So those are three things that Rabbi Akiva said. Now the Gemara is going to go through a bunch of the different other nationalities. If I recall correctly, there was a debate. Yeah. Back to halachas of Shema. Okay, have a great day.
You too.